Hello, and welcome to something completely different for this channel. Normally I make videos about fighting games, but I enjoy plenty of other game genres too, including RPGs. And one of my favorite RPGs as of recent is Fire Emblem Fates, more specifically the Conquest route of the game. I like all three routes Fates has to offer, but like many other FE fans, Conquest has got to be my favorite of the three. So that's why I'm making this two-part guide on potential builds for each party member available in Conquest, as coming up with builds for units is one of my favorite things to do while playing the game. This first video will cover all of the first generation party members, while the follow-up video will go over the second generation, as there we'll have much more to talk about regarding how to build them. This video is going to assume you already know about all of the classes and abilities that are in Fates, and that you understand how the reclass system works. If you don't understand the reclass system, here's a brief rundown. Each character has at least two sets of classes, with some characters having three. Characters can receive the class of another character by A+ or S ranking with them, and can switch between classes freely at any time. If you want a more in-depth explanation about the mechanics of Fates, I encourage you to check out serenasforest.net. I'm going to cover about 2 or 3 potential builds for each character after discussing their classes, strengths, and weaknesses. Generally, I'll try to offer at least one low investment build and one medium or high investment build. Not everyone will want to put a ton of resources into any given unit just because they can, but some people will want to make sure their favorites will be the best they can be. Also, I'll generally be avoiding having a character S-rank Corrin as a requirement for a build, as that right there is the most valuable resource in the game, and which character receives Corrin merit should be considered heavily. With all that out of the way, let's jump into it. We'll be going in order of permanent recruitment, so we're starting with the game's avatar, Corrin. Corrin is the most customizable character in the game, with the player being able to choose their secondary class tree to be anything outside of Wolfskin and Kitsune. This includes the ability to choose Hoshiden classes despite picking the Nor route, giving Corrin access to abilities that are either rare or non-existent among the rest of the Conquest cast. Corrin's talent should be chosen with heavy consideration, as not only will they have access to whatever class you choose, but so will their spouse and children. In addition to being able to choose Corrin's secondary class tree, you also get to choose a boon and bane for Corrin, customizing their base stats and growths. This also affects the growths of Corrin's children and the stats they give upon pair-up, so once again, weigh your options carefully. Before we go into classes and abilities, I have a few suggestions for boon and bane combinations. Doing minus luck is never really a bad idea. While luck isn't that bad in this game, it just doesn't affect your Corrin that much to have a luck bane. Choosing to focus either on strength or magic makes the choice of boon and bane easy, as you can always do minus magic if you're doing a physical Corrin build, or minus strength if doing a magical one. Plus speed is almost always good, as speed never hurts to have in an FE game, and minus resistance can work if you're making Corrin a class with little res to begin with, as you can just avoid magical enemies altogether. Some combinations I like are plus strength minus magic minus luck, plus speed minus luck, and plus HP minus resistance. Of course, your choice of a secondary class will partially depend on what your boon and bane are. A plus magic Corrin will probably want Dark Mage as an example. However, in my opinion, it can be very worthwhile to use Corrin's talents as a tool for their spouse. Planning on marrying Leo? Consider choosing the Dragon talent to give him Malignite. What about Jacob? Maybe choose the Ninja talent to give him and their kids early access to Replicate, and allow Jacob to carry his Dagger rank over into Master Ninja. Marrying Felicia? Picking Priestess to give her 2 more rallies plus Tome Fair might be the way to go. The possibilities are really endless, and the best part about it is that doing this doesn't really limit Corrin's reclass potential at all. Corrin is able to use a friendship seal on any same-sex party member they've achieved an A support with. As an example, female Corrin could get Dark Mage from Nyx or Ophelia, Malignite from Camilla or Veruca, and Onmyoji from their talent all at once to create the ultimate magical Corrin, all while marrying Leo to give him access to Tome Fair. There are far too many Corrin builds for me to list them all, so here's a quick example to get you to think about Corrin's potential. I once made a plus strength minus magic female Corrin with the Ninja talent. With Ninja's high speed and her naturally high strength, she decimated enemies with her powerful double attacks. But she also allowed Jacob, Kana, and Dwyer to gain early access to Replicate, Jacob by partner sealing and the kids via inheritance. And of course Corrin herself eventually learned it as well. It was a ton of fun, and I didn't even take advantage of using friendship seals on Corrin that run. So whatever idea you have for Corrin, just go nuts and have fun. Next we're covering Jacob and Felicia, who we'll be talking about at the same time due to the one key trait they have in common. They join as promoted units, but they gain EXP as if they were unpromoted, and their level cap is 40 instead of 20. This allows them to gain access to several promoted skills much earlier than other units ever could, and it makes them very strong despite their rather unimpressive growths. Another interesting trait of theirs is that their join time depends on Corrin's sex. If you pick male, Felicia will join you in Chapter 2 and Jacob will join after Chapter 15. If you pick female, it's reversed. Generally, the second servant to join will have missed out on so much time to gain EXP and supports that they're not as competent as the first servant, at least when it comes to combat. I recommend investing into the first servant as a combat unit and relegating the second one to support duty, if you even plan on using the second one at all. Looking at their stats, the two are pretty similar, with the main difference being that Jacob has higher strength and defense, while Felicia has higher magic and resistance. Since they start off wielding physical weapons and fighting mostly physical enemies, this makes Jacob the better choice for the early game. Although, I'd personally argue that Felicia is stronger overall. Regardless, I'll be suggesting builds under the assumption that you're using either one of them as a long-term unit, not just as a support unit. Starting with Jacob, he really likes using damage boosting skills to increase his damage output, since with his solid speed he'll be likely to double most enemies. Elbow Room is a great option in his base kit, but so is Quick Draw, which he receives from marrying Mozu. He can also get Trample from marrying Veruca or Camilla, or double up on breaker skills by marrying Nyx for Bowbreaker or Felicia for Shuriken Breaker. Our first example build has Jacob taking on a fully support role, marrying Felicia for Shuriken Breaker and dipping into Strategist for inspiration. Tonebreaker, Gentium, and Live to Serve round out the rest of his kit. This build allows Jacob to more than competently fight most enemies that possess 1-2 range, while still being able to support with auras and healing. If you prefer to have Jacob see a lot of combat, this second build is more suited to your tastes. This build has him marrying Camilla for Trample and Savage Blow, plus using various Cavalier Tree skills such as Elbow Room, Armored Blow, and Defender. Whether you end as a Great Knight or Paladin is mostly up to preference, as either way, he'll be a force to be reckoned with. Moving on to Felicia, she's a bit more limited at first glance compared to Jacob. A low investment build will simply have her Heart Seal into Strategist after getting Live to Serve and leveling until 15, which will give her 5 abilities and technically finish her build. This certainly works, but it's a bit boring if you ask me. Looking at her reclass options, the Mercenary tree should never be considered outside of its abilities, and the same goes for Cavalier from Parry Friendship. What she desperately wants is Dark Mage, which she can get from Leo or Odin Marriage, or Flora Friendship. This allows her to double up on breaker skills like Jacob while also boosting her magic even more. I still recommend ending as a strategist, since she starts off by using stats anyways, but dipping into Sorcerer for Malefic Aura, Heartseeker, and Bowbreaker helps her out a lot. Throw in Inspiration and Tonebreaker and you have a Felicia that can both support and fight. One final note regarding these two is a popular strategy that I see a lot, which is to marry Corrin to the first servant so that they can access Corrin's talent very early. As mentioned in the Corrin section, I've done this myself to great effect. Jacob really likes Ninja, and Felicia absolutely loves Onmyoji for its rallies, staffs, and tome fare. Silas is a fantastic early game and mid game unit, mostly due to his personal ability Vow of Friendship. Dropping Corrin's health to 50% or less makes Silas much stronger and sturdier, and this can stack with other abilities to great effect. Starting off as a Cavalier and having mercenary skills helps too. You can utilize Soul, Elbow Room, Stronger Post, and Armor Blow all very well. His stats are so well rounded outside of magic that you could almost mistake him for a second generation unit if he didn't have a daughter himself. If you want to use Silas as a low investment unit, you can dip into Hero for Stronger Post and Soul, and level as a Great Knight for Armored Blow, finishing as a Paladin. Alternatively, a more high investment build will look into his reclass options, of which there are several good choices. Friendship with Kaze grants Ninja, making Silas the perfect candidate for the Soul Master Ninja build, which is exactly what it sounds like. Give him Soul, Elbow Room, Stronger Post, Shelter, and Shuriken Fare, and he'll be all set to hit fast and recover health just as quick. On the marriage front, marrying Veruca or Camilla for Wyvern Lord is pretty much always an appealing option. On the other side of the flight spectrum, you have Azura and Falcon Knight, allowing Silas to provide some support and be lightning fast. As mentioned before, this guy's pretty well rounded, so have him occupy whatever role your army needs him to. Now we get to a particularly interesting unit in Elise. She starts off staff-locked, unable to do anything but heal, which for most players is totally fine. She can remain that way until at least level 10, at which point you can promote her into a maid to be nothing but a staff bot, or a strategist to start dealing out magical attacks. And huge ones too. Seriously, she's got the highest magic growth in the game. But for those who can't stand using staff lock units, there is a more immediate solution: heart sealing into Wyvern Rider. While this may seem ridiculous at first glance with Elise's low strength and defense, Wyverns high base stats in addition to strength plus 2 make Elise a competent axe user for a while. Once she's reached the point where her low strength growth starts to catch up with her, she's likely at C axes and a good level to promote into Malignite. Malignite Elise with the bolt axe and tomes is a force of nature, dealing amazing damage and being pretty damn fast to boot. If this all sounds too good to be true, that's because it kind of is. You see, Elise's main flaw is that her skill base and growth are both horrible, and the only thing that can fix it is Troubadour's plus 20% to her skill growth, which you can't take advantage of while in the Wyvern classes. This issue makes choosing a path for Elise quite difficult. Do you go with the more powerful but less accurate Wyvern Rider, or the more consistent but staff-locked Troubadour? The answer lies in reclassing, but before we get into that, let's talk low investment. If you don't want to put much into Elise, you can simply level her as a Troubadour for a while until her skill is satisfactory, and then promote into Strategist and call it a day. Demoiselle and Inspiration work quite well alongside her personal skill Lily's Poise, and she can always temporarily hardseal Nomade or Malignite for skills like Savage Blow and Live to Serve. However, if you want to put more into Elise, I'd say Wyvern is the way to go. Like Felicia, she really appreciates Dark Mage for Malefic Aura, Heartseeker, and Broguebreaker. Though since she can't marry Leo, for obvious reasons, she must marry Odin to get it. Honorable mention goes to Male Corrin with the Archer talent to give Elise Certain Blow and Quick Draw, which absolutely wrecks shop. A Malignite Elise will use Savage Blow and Trample, plus Malefic Aura, Heartseeker, and Bowbreaker from Odin. Alternatively, you could replace Heartseeker and Savage Blow with Certain Blow and Quick Draw if marrying Archer Corrin. Most people tend to use Arthur as a pure pair-up bot, sticking him on someone like Effie or Camilla and calling it a day. While this is absolutely fair, Arthur is definitely usable as a combat unit in his own right. He has access to two pretty solid class lines in Cavalier and Fighter, and while he's a bit on the slow side, his HP, strength, skill, and defense are all pretty solid. He can make solid use of skill-based procs like Soul, Luna, Pavis, and Aegis. A low investment Arthur will look something like this: HP plus 5, Soul, Axefair, Elbow Room, and Luna, ending as a Berserker. This Arthur is decently tanky and dishes out solid damage to boot. If you want to put a bit more into Arthur, one of the easiest ways to do it is by having him marry Effie. She joins on the same map as him and the two have a fast support together, making them easy to pair. This gives Arthur access to great skills like Defense plus 2, Pavis, and even Wary Fighter in case he gets speed screwed. An Arthur who marries Effie will have a slightly different build than the previous, swapping out Axefair, Elbow Room, and Luna for Armored Blow, Defense plus 2, and Pavis, ending as a Great Knight instead of a Berserker. This Arthur trades damage for tankiness, while still being able to dish out decent damage. Alternate S-rank options include Mozu, who give him Quick Draw and Certain Blow, or Camilla and Veruca, who give him Wyvern Rider, which is an appealing option for just about everybody. Effie is a subversion of what many have come to expect from Armor Knights across the Fire Emblem series. Characters belonging to this class are known for being able to take damage pretty well, but not having enough strength to deal a lot of it back. Effie does not fit that stereotype at all, having a low HP growth but a surprisingly high speed growth and a monstrous strength growth, tied with Keaton and a plus strength Corrin for the highest in Conquest. If you take her out of the Knight class and into something like Fighter or Archer, she'll actually begin to double enemies, and even as a Knight, she'll still avoid being doubled by most things outside of Samurais and Ninjas. Unfortunately, since her second class is Troubadour, the only way you can do that is if you utilize her supports, unless you want to go for Maid Effie, which I wouldn't recommend outside of grabbing Tomebreaker. With that being said, low investment Effie can still definitely work, as Great Knight still makes a solid class for her. Hell, even General can work thanks to parrot mechanics mitigating the class's low movement. With Defense plus 2, Pavis, Luna, Armored Blow, and Tomebreaker, Effie will break through most enemy defenses like it's nothing, and has pretty solid defenses herself. But to be honest, I feel that using Effie as a low investment unit is a bit of a waste of her potential. One of the easiest ways to make Effie better is to marry her to either Arthur, Benny, or Keaton, giving her access to the Fighter class tree. Soul, HP plus 5, and Axebreaker all do wonders for Effie, and she'd love to dip into Hero to grab those skills at some point. Arthur has a fast support with her and benefits from marrying her, so he's who I recommend the most, although Effie and Keaton make one hell of a powerful daughter. A moveset consisting of Soul, Axebreaker, Armored Blow, Defense plus 2, and HP plus 5 works very well, and is very easy to pull off. Finally, shoutout goes to Mozu, who can A+ support Effie to give her the Archer class line, which Effie can make great use of. Quick Draw stacks with her personal to great effect, while Certain Blow and Bowfair never hurt to have. Kinshi Knight gives her flight, but caps her strength pretty early, so I wouldn't recommend it. All in all, the more you put into Effie, the better she becomes, and I highly recommend giving her a try if you haven't already. Mozu is the dedicated villager of Fates, a unit who starts off low-leveled and weak, but can grow to become very strong if given the proper resources. And in Mozu's case, that resource is reclassing. The villager class that she starts in has horrible stats, but her secondary class tree is Archer, making her one of the few Hoshidans you can get in Conquest. Bows also have high might, making her easier to train than as a villager. She doesn't even need Certain Blow thanks to her ludicrously high skill and luck after Aptitude is factored in, and no matter what class she's in, her speed will be phenomenal as long as Aptitude equipped. Or really, even if it isn't. As a sniper or Kinshi Knight, Mozu is more than competent, doubling just about everything and having amazing accuracy, though be wary that Kinshi Knight hinders her strength. To compensate for this, consider picking up Life and Death from Master of Arms, or Profiteer and Spendthrift from Merchant. Either one gives her a solid boost to her damage output, though I personally prefer Life and Death since it's not dependent on gold bars like Spendthrift, and Mozu is going to be pretty squishy no matter what. A moveset of Life and Death, Bowfair, Amaterasu, Quick Draw, and Aptitude makes Mozu a powerful force, though if you really want to stack damage, you could always replace Amaterasu and Aptitude with Profiteer and Spendthrift for a plus 29 damage stack. Moving on to supports, she gets Knight from Effie Friendship and Dark Mage from Nyx Friendship. She doesn't really want to end as either. Her HP is too low to be a good General or Great Knight, and her magic is too low to be a Sorcerer or Dark Knight. However, the skills can be worth getting. Thanks to her high skill stat, Luna can proc quite often, and Bowbreaker works wonders on Kinshi Knight. Marrying Niles gives her Outlaw, which she can carry her bow rank into. Bow Knight Mozu is pretty solid, and she likes the skills from Adventurer. If you don't want her using bows, marrying either Silas or Xander gives her Cavalier, which she can carry her Lance rank into. Paladin Mozu can work quite well, and she likes having skills like Elbow Room. Though really, who you marry her to should primarily depend on which second generation unit you want to have Aptitude. Odin is quite unique, and I'm not just talking about his personality. He's a mage with equal magic and strength growths, with his highest growth being in HP, skill, and luck. What really makes him stand out though is being a dark mage with good HP and accuracy, making him the premier first generation Nosferatu tank. What makes him even better is that he's one of 3 Fates characters who are actually second generation characters from Fire Emblem Awakening, and something they all share in common is that they have Hoshidan secondary classes. Odin's secondary class is Samurai, reflecting his primary class of Myrmidon back when he was Owain. This gives him access to Vantage, which makes Nosferatu tanking go from strong to downright amazing. It also lets him get Life and Death, which lets him drop Nosferatu tanking and become a pure damage dealing machine. Although I'd say Ophelia is more suited to using Life and Death than Odin is. A basic Odin build looks something like this: Heartseeker, Malefic Aura, Vantage, Life Taker, and Bowbreaker. It's nothing fancy, but it lets Odin reliably Nosferatu tank his way through most of the game. If you want to give Odin a bit more of a power boost though, consider having him A+ support Lazlo or marry Selena, giving him access to stronger potent Shuriken Breaker. Alternatively, if Odin gets screwed in either magic, HP, or defense, consider putting Swordmaster skills into Dark Knight. Odin's balanced stats allow him to work quite effectively as one, and skills like Astra and Swordfair can be quite useful, especially with the Levin Sword. If you're doing this, I recommend marrying Azura to acquire Darting Blow, making doubling on player phase much easier. You could go Swordmaster for Odin, but it puts his base magic and tome rank to waste, unlike Dark Knight. A Dark Knight Odin could look something like this: Vantage, Darting Blow, Astra, Swordfair, and Malefic Aura. With this set of abilities, Odin with the Levin Sword can put in some solid work, and you can leave the use of Nosferatu to someone else if you so choose. Niles specializes in speed and res above all else, though he's fairly well-rounded. His magic is nothing special, but he makes a solid adventurer, being able to decently heal and use the Shining Bow. Bow Knight trades that magic and utility for more movement, some one-range options, and alternate skills. His reclass option is Dark Mage, though he doesn't want to end as a sorcerer, and though Dark Knight works with his balanced stats, he'd have to grind both sword and tome rank from E, which is unideal. Niles doesn't get much from his A supports, only being able to get Fighter from Arthur. This allows him to double up on Rally support with Rally skill and strength, or get another Breaker skill and Axe Breaker, but not much else. His bulk is simply too low to make good use of Soul or HP plus 5. When it comes to marriage, Azura gives him Falcon Knight, which is kinda like Adventurer but with flight. Mozu gives him Archer and lets him carry over his bow rank, and is a great class line in general, and it's my preferred choice if using the Niles long term. Finally, if you want to marry Niles to Corrin, Note that he's actually Conquest's only gay romance option, meaning you can marry him to either male or female Corrin. However, if he marries male Corrin, then Kana and Nina won't be born, so keep that in mind. Azura is Fates' dancer, or in this case, singer. She allows another unit to act again by giving up her own turn, an extremely powerful tool that can be utilized in a variety of ways. Note that she can only do this while in her primary class of Songstress, so unless you want to make the game harder for yourself, I'd recommend staying in Songstress for the whole game. If you do that, Azura's build is mostly inconsequential outside of Inspiring Song, which she learns at level 10. Once you learn this, you should never unequip it, as it helps many units hit doubling thresholds they would otherwise have trouble with. If you don't like using dancers though, or you just want to play a challenge run of sorts, Azura makes a surprisingly solid combat unit. Her secondary class is Sky Knight, and she has pretty high strength, speed, and skill. She makes a solid Falcon Knight, being able to heal, rally, and attack pretty well. Though note that her HP and defense will always be pretty low, so she shouldn't be taking physical attacks when you can help it. When it comes to reclassing, she prefers going to a class that she can use her lance rank in, such as Paladin. As such, marrying someone like Silas or Xander might be the way to go, as Benny's Knight doesn't meld well with her stats. Nyx is a dark mage, but is basically the polar opposite of Odin. Low HP, luck, and skill, non-existent strength, but very high magic and speed. This makes Nosferatu tanking unideal for Nyx, as her shaky hit rates even with Heartseeker could spell death for her, and she's at risk of being one-shot before she even has a chance to heal. What she is good at, however, is doing the one-shotting herself with her sky-high magic. As such, she really wants to be a sorcerer to boost her magic as much as possible. Dark Knight can boost her defenses somewhat, but it's not really worth the trade-off, and any non-magic class is just a waste of her high magic stat. However, there are several skills Nyx would like from other classes, chief among them being Sniper's Certain Blow to fix her accuracy, which she can get from befriending Mozu. This also gives her Quick Draw, which is basically plus 4 damage all the time since she'll also never see action on enemy phase. Combine these with Malefic Aura, Shuriken Breaker, and Bow Breaker, and she can put in some real work. Alternatively, you can go for the more silly option of Adventurer, allowing her to use both staffs and the Shining Bow, even if she has to grind bows up to C to do it. She can still deal very high amounts of damage, but with the additions of staffs to her repertoire, and she can carry over her bow rank from a time as a sniper. A set of Quick Draw, Certain Blow, Malefic Aura, Movement +1, and Pass is pretty effective, and makes Nyx very fun to use. Also, if you're using DLC classes, Nyx makes a fantastic Witch, although I'm generally not considering DLC for this guide. Camilla is widely considered to be the best party member in Conquest, and it's not hard to see why. She comes in a great class tree, has fantastic bases, solid growths, and gains EXP more than a pre-promote usually does. The skills from the Dark Mage line help her out quite a bit, like Bow Breaker and Life Taker. She does so well as a Malignite that you really don't need to make her anything else outside of getting skills, although Wyvern Lord might be better for the higher strength if you don't mind having lower res. A moveset of Strength +2, Savage Blow, Trample, Life Taker, and Bow Breaker is basic but effective, although I'd personally recommend investing a bit more into Camilla than just that. She can get Soul and Axebreaker from Veruca, Soul and Strong Riposte from either Selena or Lazlo, Pass and Movement +1 from Niles, Elbow Room and Armored Blow from Silas, Replicate from Kaze. The list is long and full of great options. Wyvern Lord and Malignite are her best options for final classes, but really, Camilla can work in just about anything outside of a purely magical class. Veruca is just a really unfortunate case. She joins at the same time as Camilla, a superior Wyvern rider in just about every way, who also happens to be the best character in the game. Still, if you want to use Veruca, she can hold her own with pretty solid skill and defense stats. She also possesses pretty good class options in Wyvern Rider and Fighter, giving her the ability to use 2 rallies, 2 breaker skills, Soul, and Axe Fair. I personally prefer using the latter 2 abilities with HP +5 and both of her rallies to create a simple but effective unit who can support and fend for herself in combat. Using this moveset as a Wyvern Lord gives her flight and defense, whereas Berserker trades those off for raw offense. In terms of reclassing, she can A+ support Camilla to essentially become Camilla Jr., using Dark Mage skills while in Wyvern Lord. If you want to lean into her defensive side, marrying Benny, Silas, or Xander to get into Great Knight can work, and she makes good use of Elbow Room, Luna, and Armored Blow. Using those 3 skills in combination with Axe Fair and Soul makes her a unit who is both strong and sturdy. Veruca might be the inferior Wyvern Rider, but she can still hold her own pretty well all things considered. Selena is a speedy tank, a unique combination of stats. She has solid speed, HP, and defense, with decent res to boot. Her weak points are strength and skill, with the rest of her stats being average. She's also the second Awakening Kid to appear in Fates, with her second class being Sky Knight, referencing her mother Cordelia's class of Pegasus Knight. It might be tempting to make her one since you're pretty limited when it comes to Hoshido classes on Conquest, but it's not really worth it. What Selena wants is either more bulk or more strength, not more speed. Darting Blow is worth picking up at the very least, and Rally Speed isn't all too bad either. Hero gives her more HP, which is nice, but Soul isn't really all that worth it with her somewhat low skill. Bow Knight gives her bows to work with and an extra rally, which is what I recommend for her if you're not giving her any help from supports. Darting Blow, Rally Speed, Rally Skill, Axe Breaker, and Shuriken Breaker makes for a solid kit that provides some support and allows Selena to fight pretty well. Though this does work, I personally like putting in just a little bit more effort into making Selena a combat unit. By befriending either Camilla or Veruca, both of whom she has fast supports with, Selena can become a Wyvern Lord, which is a perfect class for her. She can carry Darting Blow into the class to continue doubling enemies, and it provides her with more defense and speed than her other classes. It also gives her another Breaker skill and another Rally to use, which never hurts. On the other hand, Lazlo and Kaze give her Ninja, allowing her to be a Soul Master Ninja just like Silas, although again, her low skill makes it a bit risky. Kaze is one of the few Hoshidans you get in Conquest, and he's very strong. He's got the highest speed growth in the game, as well as solid HP, skill, and res. His strength is solid, but none of his innate classes give any additional strength growth except for Mechanist, so he may end up stat screwed in that department. Going Master Ninja will amplify his strengths, while going Mechanist will balance him out a bit, but he'll want the skills from both either way. A basic Kaze build will look something like this: Block Touch, Poison Strike, Lethality, Shuriken Fair, and Replicate, ending as either a Master Ninja or a Mechanist. In terms of reclassing, I personally enjoy A+ supporting him with either Silas or Xander to get Cavalier. Elbow Room, Luna, and Aegis are all good fits on Kaze, and his speed is still amazing even as a Great Knight, allowing him to be fast, tanky, and strong all at once. Another similar choice is Camilla or Veruca, making Kaze the fastest Wyvern Lord you've ever seen. No matter what you make him though, Kaze is bound to be good, just so long as you do something to patch up that strength of his. Lazlo is very interesting, as he's the third and final Awakening Kid, and as such has a Hoshidan secondary class. That class is Ninja, referencing... what exactly? I'm not sure, but anyways, the other thing that makes Lazlo interesting is his personal skill, which is a unique rally that grants +1 to strength and speed, and stacks with other rallies. This, plus his innate access to rally skill, makes him the premier rally bot of Fates. Although if you're not interested in that, he makes a fine combat unit in his own right. His stats are pretty solid across the board except for his speed and res, although even those are decent. He also has fast supports with Xander and Parry, giving him fast access to Cavalier if you so choose. A solid moveset for combat Lazlo is Elbow Room, Strong Riposte, Soul, Rally Skill, and Shuriken Breaker. This gives him decent damage, decent support, and just makes him all around solid at whatever you may need him to do. But if you're like me, you'll enjoy putting more investment into Lazlo to make him a full-time rally bot. By befriending Keaton, he gains access to Berserker and therefore rally strength, and by marrying Selena, he gets Falcon Knight and therefore rally speed. Having both of those along with rally skill and replicate make Lazlo a rally bot who can duplicate himself and buff the skill of allies by 4 and their strength and speed by 5. It's a lot of investment, but I'd say it's worth it in the end. You can even have him end as a Falcon Knight so that he can fly and support with healing in addition to rallying. Parry is the second of the first generation Cavaliers you get in Conquest, and while Silas has balanced stats across the board, Parry is quite the opposite. She excels in strength, speed, and res, with the rest of her stats being just okay outside of magic. This means that her secondary class tree of Dark Mage is mainly just for the skills, although the skills are quite useful, mainly Heartseeker and Life Taker. Due to her more focused stats, she generally prefers Great Knight over Paladin, though Defender and Aegis may be worth picking up at some point. Without any supports, her abilities will look something like this: Elbow Room, Defender, Aegis, Heartseeker, and Life Taker. With Life Taker, Parry can recover health on player phase, get the stats from her personal, and then go to town on the enemy phase with those stats. Really though, Parry does quite a bit better with some investment, so let's talk reclassing. Selena Friendship or Lazlo Marriage offers Mercenary, which is useful for Strong Riposte and Soul, and Charlotte, Arthur, and Keaton are their Fighter, which gives her Berserker. Both of these are useful, and they allow you to use parry in two different ways. With Mercenary, parry can recover health and deal more damage on enemy phase, which is when her personal skill will be most useful. As a Berserker, though, parry can become an absolute nuke on player phase, stacking Elbow Room, Axe Fair, and her personal after a dance from Azura. Lastly, if you are using DLC classes, Dark Falcon gives parry flight, carries over her lance rank, and offers Gale Force, which works wonderfully with her personal. Remember how I said that Effie was a subversion of the expectations that Fire Emblem players have for Armor Knights? Well, Benny here is much more like the traditional Effie Armor Knight. Tons of defense and HP, decent but not great strength, and absolutely abysmal magic and speed. At least he has good skill and surprisingly respectable res, making his stat spread actually pretty solid outside of that god-awful speed. As you can probably guess, Benny loves to get wary fighter as soon as possible, as even switching to the fighter class line won't help his speed enough to make a difference. Speaking of the fighter class line though, Benny likes having some of its skills like HP plus 5 and Soul to boost his survivability even higher. Combine those with Pavis, Armored Blow, and Wary Fighter, and Benny basically becomes immortal as a general, albeit still not great at doing a lot of damage back. Still, sometimes what you need is a super high defense unit who can plug a choke point, and there's nobody better suited to that than Benny. When it comes to A+ supports, he actually gets no additional classes on the Nor route, meaning the only way to get him new classes is through marriage. One of the best skills for Benny is Tomebreaker, which you can get from marrying Elise, Felicia, or Effie. However, that's about all he wants from that class tree, and I'd argue there are better options out there for him. Parry grants Cavalier, and with it Elbow Room, Shelter, Defender, and Aegis, all skills Benny would like to have. Great Knight Benny with Cavalier skills is pretty solid, dealing respectable damage while still tanking like a champ. Finally, like many other characters, marrying Veruca or Camilla for Wyvern Lord is never a bad idea. Charlotte is kind of like Arthur, except she trades some of his tankiness for more speed and raw power. Her HP, strength, and speed are all insane, and her luck is solid, but her skill is shaky and her magic, defense, and resistance are all atrocious. In other words, she one-rounds enemies with ease, but you need to watch out to make sure she doesn't get one-rounded in return. If Benny is the ultimate tank, then Charlotte is the ultimate glass cannon, though at least she has so much HP that she'll be able to take at least one hit most of the time. Funnily enough, her second class is Troubadour, which is useful for Tomebreaker. It also gives her rally resistance and inspiration, which when combined with rally strength allows Charlotte to play a more supportive role while still dealing a ton of damage as a Berserker. Speaking of which, Berserker is absolutely Charlotte's best ending class. It's not worth investing into her awful bulk, and while Hero offers more skill, anything that hampers her ability to kill in one hit isn't worth Charlotte's time outside of grabbing skills. With HP plus 5, Soul, Axe Fair, Tomebreaker, and Axebreaker, Charlotte can deal a ton of damage without any supports needed. If you want a more support-oriented build though, replace Soul, Axebreaker, and HP plus 5 with Rally Strength, Rally Resistance, and Inspiration. When it comes to reclassing, Veruca's Wyvern Lord makes Charlotte more mobile and gives her yet another Rally and Breaker skill. Keaton, Niles, and Lazlo give Bow Knight, giving her yet another Rally and Breaker. As you can probably tell, most of her support options help her become a better support unit, while a combat-oriented Charlotte requires less investment to be effective. Although, like Elise, I should mention that marrying Charlotte to Archer Corrin to get certain blow and quick draw is just as great as you'd think it to be. Leo's stats are overall really solid, with great magic and res and his only poor stats being strength and skill, which aren't even that bad. His starting class of Dark Knight suits him very well, giving him high movement, good defenses, and solid mixed offenses. Sorcerer gives more magic and S-rank tomes as well as access to Nosferatu, which might be worth it later on in the campaign. Either way, Leo can make good use of the skills in both classes, and a low investment Leo can simply use the moveset of Heartseeker, Maleficora, Vengeance, Bowbreaker, and Lifetaker. While Leo works just fine this way, I personally like putting a bit more into him. Looking at his supports, he has fast supports with Odin, Niles, and Xander, all of whom grant him different options. Pass from Adventurer and Shuriken Breaker from Bow Knight are decent options, as are Elbow Room and Aegis from Paladin. But in my opinion, the best use of a Friendship Seal on Leo is on Odin Friendship to go into Master of Arms. This gives him Vantage, which can make him another really good Nosferatu tank, as well as Life and Death, which trades his tankiness for raw power. When it comes to marriage, his best option is Veruca, who gives him Malignite. This offers a bit more skill as well as Flight and Trample, which is quite potent when combined with Vantage. A high investment Leo might look something like this. A Malignite with the skills Malefic Aura, Bowbreaker, Vantage, Savage Blow, and Trample. Leo does a fantastic job with this build, and if you want, you can even replace Savage Blow with Life and Death. Leo gets better and better the more you put into him, and will be a valuable member of your army no matter what. Keaton is the definition of specialized, with amazing HP, strength, and defense, and all of his other stats ranging from shaky at best to awful at worst. He's also locked to one range unless you take him out of his primary class and into fighter, so you'll probably want to do that in most cases. Hero helps out Keaton a lot, giving him more skill growth while giving him plenty of HP to work with. He also gets Soul, which complements his stat spread quite nicely. A basic Keaton build will use HP plus 5, Soul, Better Odds, Odd Shaped, and Beastbane. Whether you end as a hero or Wolfsegner is up to what stats you want. If you want strength and defense, go Wolfsegner. If you want HP and skill, go Hero. Going into supports, Benny gives him Knight if you want Pavis or Armored Blow, and like I've said many times before, Veruca and Camilla give Wyvern Lord, which is amazing as always. A Wyvern Keaton with Armored Blow, Pavis, Soul, Better Odds, and HP plus 5 is essentially immortal against physical attacks, while still powerful enough to tear enemies apart. Most players just use Keaton as a parrot bot and call it a day, but I encourage you to try him sometime if you haven't yet. He's pretty fun. Gunter is weird, to say the least. He's supposed to be your Jagan, but he permanently joins you halfway through the game. His bases are solid and his classes are great, but his growths are awful, limiting his usefulness. It's a good thing his classes are good too, as outside of female Corrin, the only support option he has is Jacob. Speaking of Jacob though, Gunter does have a saving grace. Like Jacob and Felicia, his level cap is 40 instead of 20, and he can gain multiple promoted skills much earlier than other units can. Luna, Soul, Armored Blow, Trample, and Savage Blow makes for a really good set of abilities that can carry Gunter even as his stats fall off. But what if you wanted Gunter to play a more supportive role? It makes sense to do so since the support unit's stats don't really matter, meaning Gunter can stay relevant for much longer as a support unit than he can as a combat one. To do this, have him pick up Rally Defense, Rally Skill, and Savage Blow. Then, through Jacob Friendship, pick up Rally Resistance and Inspiration, and end as a Butler. This gives Gunter the utility of rallies, staffs, and debuffs without having to worry about his stats. Despite his growths, Gunter can still put in work if you really want him to. While not being as game-defining as Ryoma is and Birthright, Xander is by no means anything less than stellar in combat. With great strength, HP, and defense, as well as solid luck and skill, Xander only really struggles in magic and resistance, with his speed being decent. He also has his unique weapon Siegfried, which boosts his defense while in his inventory and as a sword with 1 to 2 range. As such, Xander prefers to stay in a class that allows him to use swords, whether that be his starting class of Paladin or something like Hero or Master Ninja. Without any investment, Xander is still very strong. Just give him a Great Knight to grab Armored Blow and Luna, and then have Elbow Room, Defender, and Aegis round out his moveset. But I'd argue that if you're going to be using Xander, you ought to be putting a bit more investment into him than just that. By marrying Selena or Charlotte, he gains access to Soul and either HP plus 5 or Stronger Post, all three of which are strong skills to have on Xander, especially Soul. By befriending Kaze, he can become a Master Ninja to increase his speed and res, while still being able to use Siegfried. What's more, he can get Replicate. And while I've never tried this myself, I know I have to someday, as 2 Xanders sounds just amazing. A Soul Master Ninja build using Soul, Replicate, Elbow Room, Defender, and either Stronger Post or HP plus 5 lets Xander go to town in 2 places at once, dealing great damage and healing himself while he does it. Finally, while having Wyvern Lord as a second class is great, it doesn't let you use Siegfried, so be prepared to give up always having 1-2 range if you go down that route. No matter what you decide to make him though, Xander will always end up amazing, and I'd argue he's the second best party member in Conquest, just behind Camilla. Shura is similar to Gunter in a few ways. He's a pre-promote with bad growths, 3 class sets, and no supports outside of Corrin. The difference is that Shura is treated as a normal unit with a level cap of 20 and without the ability to easily rack up promoted skills like Gunter can. The trade-off being that Shura's growths are a bit better than Gunter's. You can choose to kill Shura in the story and get boots instead, but if you want to use Shura, he's definitely not bad. His classes are Outlaw, Ninja, and Fighter, giving him a couple of rallies, a couple of breakers, Soul, Replicate, Pass, and other useful abilities. Similarly to Gunter, I recommend putting Shura into a more supportive role, with a moveset something along the lines of Rally Skill, Rally Strength, Shuriken Breaker, Movement +1, and Pass, ending as an adventurer for staff utility. If you want to, though, Shura has the tools available to take him into a more offensive role. Mechanist makes for a solid final class for an offensive Shura, letting him keep his bow rank while also getting debuff utility. Replicate, Shuriken Fair, Poison Strike, Lethality, and Shuriken Breaker makes for a solid set of abilities that allow for Shura to deal heavy chip damage and sometimes even get in an instant kill. Shura's growths might not be the best, but his solid class options and bases allow him to stay relevant. Oh boy, this one's a doozy. Flora has growth similar to Jacob and Felicia, but counts as a normal pre-promote like Shura. Similarly to Shura, she only supports Corrin and has 3 classes instead of 2. Interestingly, Dark Mage is one of her classes, though her magic isn't that great. Actually, none of her stats are that great, with her highest growth rate being skill at 45%. At least her bases are pretty solid, in particular her skill and res. She makes a solid mage killer and staff bot, and doesn't need too much investment to do so, plus she has a few rallies in her toolkit to boot. Rally Resistance, Rally Skill, Seal Magic, Inspiration, and Toebreaker allow Flora to rally, fight mages, and support with staffs all at once. Whether you want to end as a strategist or maid is up to preference. Maid has debuffs and S-rank staffs, plus Flora's strength growth is higher than her magic growth, where strategist has more movement and can target enemy resistance. If you really want to use Flora as a combat unit, she does have some solid skills to work with, though I wouldn't recommend it. She's too frail on the physical side to be fighting anything but mages, and none of her classes increase her defense enough except for Dark Knight, where she has to grind 2 different weapon ranks up from E. If you're dead set on using Flora offensively, have her grab some offensive proc skills like Soul and Vengeance to use with her great skill stat, and grab Bowbreaker and Axebreaker so she can at least fight some physical enemies. Finally, end as a Dark Knight for Life Taker and some extra defense. The final first generation unit that you can recruit. Izana is a Hoshiden who, just like our last few party members, has 3 class sets and only supports Corrin. He provides some useful utility in Rally Magic and Rally Luck, skills you can't get in Conquest outside of a Monk or Shrine Maiden Corrin. Unfortunately, with how late he joins and the fact that he only joins at level 5, he probably won't get the chance to get a bunch of skills to become a great combat unit. If you want to use him for pure staff utility, switching to Great Master allows him to achieve A rank in staffs, though he loses his ability to attack with magic. I really wish I had more to say about Izana, but he just doesn't have the time to do much outside of his rally utility. And that's all for the first generation of Fates Conquest. Next time we'll cover the second generation and all that entails. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, consider leaving a like or a comment, and any feedback or criticism is greatly appreciated. See you next time!